Index Astartes, Blood Angels, drinkers of sensations and souls. Before their fall, the Blood Angels were the noblest warriors of the Imperium. Their Primarch, an icon of purity and devotion in a galaxy where the darkness of the long night yet held sway. But they were deceived, and pay now forevermore the price of the purity they had sought to keep at all cost. Now they are the most debased of all traitors, their souls consumed by an unholy thirst that binds them to the dark god Slaanesh. Where once they were protectors, now they are predators, seeking to slake their desires by preying upon those they were sworn to defend. Twisted in body as well as in spirit, their beauty but a mask for the corruption beneath. They have slain entire worlds in orgies of blood drinking, tearing open the veil between realities as the chosen scions of the Dark Prince. With their minds enslaved to the whims of the youngest god, there is no perversion, no crime, no atrocity that will give them pause in their endless quest for blood. Origins. Long before the Imperium learned the true threat of the warp and the malevolent powers that dwell within the hellish realm, the corruption of chaos was already reaching out to twist humanity. The plague of mutation had befallen mankind for millennia, and with the discovery of the warp drive technology and the rise of the Psykers, the opportunity for the ruinous powers to corrupt and taint grew greatly. But the blasphemy that is mutation can also be caused by more mundane causes, reflecting only the poor living conditions of the afflicted, not the corruption of their souls. So it was on the world of Baal in the days before the beginning of the Great Crusade. Baal had once been a cultured and prosperous world, with its two moons equally apt to supporting life. But millennia before the beginning of the Great Crusade, its people turned on each other in a terrible war, the cause of which has long been lost to the ages. Biological and nuclear weapons were employed, turning the main planet into a wasteland and devastating the moon's biosphere. The great cities of Baal were reduced to rubble, and its enlightened people to ragged bands of survivors. Due to the radioactivity and pollution caused by the war, mutation ran rampart amongst them, and after a few generations, most of Baal was overrun by the tribes of cannibalistic monsters. Only a few clans managed to keep themselves genetically pure by taking refuge in the few sealed vaults that had survived the collapse, or erring amidst the desolation in ragtag rad suits. As years passed, the number of those human survivors dwindled, with the feral tribes of mutants grew. While the feral tribes of mutants grew in number, boldness, and monstrosity. It was on this world that Sanguinius, son of the Emperor, landed after the Dark God stole the children of the Master of Mankind. The story of Sanguinius' youth is written in old Balite myth, and was compiled by the Inquisition savant Hiorenticus Lucido. In the years before his studies drove him mad and his inquisitorial master had to kill him. His work, accessible only to the highest-ranking inquisitors, tells us a story of courage and greatness typical of the Primarchs, but an attentive reading will reveal that already the signs of the character traits that would lead to the angel's downfall were already present. Although little more than a babe at the moment of his arrival, the young Primarch already bore the angelic wings that would so mark his existence. When a tribe of nomads found the child amidst the radioactive sands, they thought him to be a mutant, and several claimed that they ought to slay the newborn at once. In centuries to come, many would dearly wish they had done so, but such was the beauty of Sanguinius that their leader just couldn't bring himself to put him down. Taking the child with them, the tribe brought him to the nearest of the radiation-proof vault, begging its masters to take the child with them, safe from the dangers of the wasteland. Although the Vault's lords were as fearful of Sanguinius's wings as the tribesmen had been, they were too swayed by the infant's glorious form and welcomed him in the confined society. Sanguinius grew up within this vault, reaching the size of a full-grown adult in a few months, and continuing his growth far beyond that. During that time, he learned the fragmentary history of Baal and the terrible fate that had befallen its people. The hatred of the mutant was engraved within him by his teachers, but at the same time he began to question his own nature. None around him thought of his wings as an alarming sign anymore, having been in his presence for years, and having quickly succumbed to his otherworldly charisma. But the Primarch himself found his difference disquieting, and in the fragments of writings from these days that have survived the passing of time, it is obvious that he was worried his wings meant that he had more in common with the mutant hordes than with the human survivors. This disquiet was tempered by the constant battles fought by the Vault's defenders against the mutants that tried to fight their way inside, pressed forward by the promise of plunder and sheer animal hatred for those who weren't twisted as they were. Sanguinius proved his might in these battles, his immense strength and keen tactical insight helping defend the Vault from many a marauding horde. But it wasn't enough for the young Primarch to protect his adopted home. He wanted to purge the entire world of the mutant taint, to eradicate every trace of the corruption that so repulsed him. He studied the beast's remains for weaknesses, and spent long hours over old maps of Baal, noting the emplacements of other vaults and mutant strongholds. Already a grand plan was forming in his transhuman mind. Baal was ruined, poisoned by its masters, nearly unto death, but there was still a chance that it could be saved. Its slow fall into entropy could yet be stopped. However, it would require lore and technology far beyond Sanguinius's current reach. The creature was ugly. Its skin was grey and covered in cancerous growths. The lumps of several limbs that had never grown to full size emerged from its torso, and it looked upon Sanguinius with 7 eyes wide in whatever emotion was currently occupying his diseased brain. With a snarl, Sanguinius brought down his weapon, little more than a lump of metal, but the only thing he had found so far that was correctly sized for him, and shattered its skull. As pieces of flesh were splattered on the floor, and the rest of the horde stepped back, unwilling to cross the breach that had allowed their leader passage into the vault, Sanguinius wondered if he was looking at his fate. Would he end up like this one day? All reason gone from his mind, replaced by aimless hate? Was the reason these mutants hesitated not because they feared him, but because they saw him as one of their own and were unable to understand why he stood against them? No, this was not him. This will never be him. He looked around and saw the defenders of the vault finally reaching the breach, wearing sealed suits and wielding flamers. One of them saw him. I'm not sure what that's supposed to mean. One of them saw him look in his direction and nodded thankfully to the young angel. Relief flooded through Sanguinius as the soldiers took up position at his side, covering the mass of altered flesh with cones of purifying fire. He was better than this wretched creature. His blood was pure, his wings sign of his greater destiny, not of some freak accident of genetics. After all, if he was truly a mutant, then why would the people of Baal love him as they did? They knew mutant kind very well. They had fought them for generations. That they loved him and fought by his side was all the proof he needed, that he was superior to the twisted freaks that sought to end all life, different of their own, in a desperate attempt to erase the source of their self-hatred. As he reached his full-grown form, Sanguinius left the cocoon of the vault and led the crusade across all of Baal's surface. At the start, only a handful followed him, but soon tribes flocked to his banner, drawn by his vision of a planet free of the flesh-changed. With his power, Sanguinius reaped victory after victory against the barbaric hordes of mutants. His superior intellect allowed him to repair and use some of the old weapons of Baal, long fallen into disuse as the knowledge necessary to maintain them was lost. Rad Seal tanks rode at the head of his armies as they cleansed Baal of mutant life in a succession of glorious battles on the desert plains. Decontamination chambers were restarted, and the ever-present fear of mutation receded. With some of the devices found in the Forsaken Vault, Sanguinius's primitive tech priests were capable of purifying regions of Baal that had been deadly to all life for generations. Slowly, at first, then faster with every vault and tribe that joined him, Sanguinius's crusade reclaimed Baal. Clans that had been separated from all other human civilization and tribes that had survived for centuries in hidden caves were reunited. Finally, as the 10th year of the crusade neared its end, the armies of Baal crushed the last of the mutant hordes, Sanguinius slaying its grotesque leader himself. As the people of Baal rejoiced at their liberation, the skies were set ablaze, and from the heavens descended 1,000 behemoths of steel. The Emperor had arrived to the world that his son had freed from darkness. The Emperor had come to Baal, accompanied by the 9th Space Marine Legion, somehow knowing not just that one of his sons waited for him there, but also which one. The Master of Mankind met his son in the middle of the battlefield, descending on the planet in a flash of teleportation. At once, Sanguinius knew that this being in golden armor was his father, and he knelt before the Emperor told him to raise and embrace him. This was doubly a day of joy for Baal, as not only had he been freed of the mutant threat, it was also reunited with the rest of mankind across the galaxy. Baal's moons, wiped clean of life during the cataclysmic war, were claimed by the Legion as fortresses and recruitment stations. With all the technology available to the Imperium, it was possible to cleanse Baal of radiation. But the Angel refused that the planet be restored fully, believing that the harsh lifestyle of the desert would produce strong recruits for the Legion he was to command. The Emperor acceded to this demand, and the two superhuman beings returned to Terra, where Sanguinius would learn all he needed to know before he could take up his rightful mantle as the master of the 9th Legion. The Great Crusade. Once his initiation was concluded, Sanguinius was given command of the legion crafted in his image from his father's hands. All legions were overjoyed when their Primarch was found, but none more so than the Blood Angels, for their gene sire appeared to be the embodiment of every imperial ideal: noble, powerful, merciful, and compassionate on mankind's plight. Sanguinius had seen a world return from the brink of oblivion, and he firmly believed that it was the Imperium's duty to share the salvation with as many worlds as possible. On the plains of Baal, at the very same location where he had defeated the last of the world's mutant warlords, Sanguinius made a grand proclamation to his whole legion. The 300 companies knelt before their father and renewed their oath to the Imperium and the ideals of the Great Crusade. The Blood Angels illustrated themselves in the Great Crusade. Each of them was a warrior as much as a soldier, and their assault forces were amongst the best of the Imperium. Many Xenos breeds were brought to extinction by the Blood Angels' blades, and joint operations with other legions showed that they had a friendly, if somewhat secretive, attitude. Worlds ruled over by tyrants were liberated in a single strike, and when a planet was found that fitted the criteria for compliance and joining the Imperium, the 9th Legion always made sure that the transition was effected with diplomacy rather than bloodshed. At the same time, however, the Blood Angels displayed unprecedented dedication in the purge of these worlds where the human genome had been profaned by genetic tampering and alien corruption. During the long night, many cultures had taken to modify their genetic code in order to adapt to the hostile world on which they found themselves stranded, while others had integrated mutants as part of their society. The legionnaires of the Ninth broke the back of many such an empire, showing their people the error of their ways by charging directly into the stronghold of their altered rulers before displaying their bodies for all to see. If these kings and tyrants claimed that the changes they had made to the perfection of the human form had made them stronger, then why had them fallen to the blades of the Blood Angels? It made for a potent argument, as did the decapitated heads of the world's former masters. Entire population thus converted to the imperial truth, although these planets would always regard the Space Marines' legions with dread rather than respect. Other legions saw that these violent purges would slight worry, fearing that excess force would alienate the very people they were trying to protect. But Sanguinius assuaged their fears, telling his brothers that the purity of the human gene code was sacred, and that if they started allowing for deviancy, soon the human race would shatter in a myriad mutated offshoots and would ultimately destroy itself. Not all were convinced, but without rebuke from the Emperor, and compared to the exemplar record of the Ninth Legion in all other aspects, this bit of passion was allowed. Even when entire worlds were burned because of their entire population had been enhanced through gene mods of dubious origin and efficiency, the Imperium turned a blind eye. Every legion had been forced to take such drastic measures at some point, and though the Blood Angels did it more often, it was thought to be just a coincidence, the inevitable result of them facing gene-altered civilizations more often. Sanguinius was beloved by all of his brothers, though some were jealous of his prestige among the human population of the Imperium. Fulgrim was one of those, and Lorgar, though not concerned with matters of appearance, as was the Phoenician, worried that Sanguinius may unwillingly create a cult around his person. Others, such as Angron or Russ, didn't care for their brother's beauty one bit, but respected his prowess on the battlefield. Yet the closest Primarch to the Angel was Horus. Lupercal and Sanguinius fought together on many campaigns, and the bonds of brotherhood between their legions seemed to be unbreakable. When Horus was chosen at Ulanor to be War Master of the Imperium, Sanguinius supported his ascension, even though many thought he would have made just as good a War Master as Horus, if not better. But unbeknownst to the Imperium at large, the seed of ruin were already present within the Blood Angels. It was during the Great Crusade that Sanguinius first learned of the flaw within his legion's genetic, a thirst for blood that would sometimes awaken in battle and destroy the mind of the unfortunate legionnaire entirely, leaving only a bloodthirsty animal in its wake, a beast that would attack enemies and allies alike in its fury. The legion commanders had long known of it, and had kept it secret from even their allies in the Imperium. They feared that the Emperor would order the destruction of the Blood Angels if he was to learn of the genetic defect in what was otherwise a perfect instrument of war. The reason why the Blood Angels seemed to encounter more deviant human civilizations was because, since long before Sanguinius had been found, they had been seeking for a cure to the curse that afflicted their bloodline. The apothecaries plundered the secrets of these cultures before purging them, at least as much to hide the evidence of their deeds as to purify the human gene pool. Sanguinius continued this practice, growing increasingly more desperate as decades passed and no sign of a cure was found, while more and more of his sons were lost to the red thirst each year. At the same times, dark dreams haunted Sanguinius' nights. The Primarch had always been gifted with a prophetic ability that had served him well in the wars of the Great Crusade, but now he saw only darkness ahead of him. He was falling falling down an infinite abyss, his wings broken and useless. All around him was nothing but blackness, a terrible sense of loss, and flashing images of horror and war. He saw his sons lost to the red thirst, burning entire worlds in their wake, piling the skulls of the fallen and drinking the blood of their foes, while roaring the hatred at skies filled with crimson clouds. He saw Horus towering above him, Worldbreaker held aloft, and caught the expression of sorrow on his brother's face before he brought the weapon down. He saw his sons die one by one, not like warriors, but like mad dogs put down by their masters, as entire legions moved to crush them and stop their enraged rampage across the galaxy. Something seized him and turned him around in the darkness of the abyss so that he was facing it. It was a blood-stained angel, staring back at him with madness in its eyes and eternal agony etched on its once regal features. Its face was gaunt and fangs emerged from its mouth. Chains running through skulls were tightened around its flesh, the eye sockets flaring with red flames as they stared at him in wordless accusation. "No more peace," said the creature, in a voice that was the screams of every blood angel that had ever lived or would ever live. "No more light, no more angelic grace, only blood and skulls and souls for you, brother." Sanguinius woke up screaming. The fall of the angel. It was while Sanguinius despaired over the fate of his sons that Guliman made his first move to bring his angelic brother to his side. The Lord of Ultramar had already sold his soul to chaos, and was now preparing for his rebellion against the Emperor. He knew, having been confirmed by prophecy, what any tactician could have guessed, that should Horus and Sanguinius stand together in defense of the master of mankind, he would never triumph. Though he had already taken steps to address the issue of the War Master, he still wanted Sanguinius to be on his side. Guliman knew that unlike some of their brothers, Sanguinius would never turn against the Emperor out of personal gain or ambition. The angel was too selfless for that, and the failed attempt would alarm the Emperor of Guliman's designs, as well as send Sanguinius straight after him. And Guliman, for all his power, was still wary of the 300 company's might. So he designated a plan that would either bring the Blood Angels to his side or see them destroyed entirely. Roboute arranged for him and his brother to meet, far away from the Great Crusade's center of activities. There he told Sanguinius that he knew of the Blood Angel's curse, and that he had learned of a potential cure. Though Sanguinius was shocked to learn that his legion's greatest secret had been uncovered, he was even more eager to learn what his brother knew. According to Guliman, his legion had once crossed the path of a particular Xenos breed, calling itself the Nephilims. These creatures had enslaved countless human worlds, and fed upon their people to sate their psychic need for worship. However, they had also possessed a great knowledge in the field of genetic alteration, and though Guliman himself had remained distant from such secrets, he knew that they were still consignated to the world where the 13th Legion had finally broken the back of the Nephilim course across the galaxy. If Sanguinius was willing, Roboute would give him this world's coordinates, that he may bring his legion there, and, with the knowledge of the Nephilim, save the Blood Angels from the doom that creeped in their genetic code. So desperate was Sanguinius for a way to save his sons from the curse his blood had instillated within them, that the angel didn't doubt Guliman's words for a moment. After thanking his brother, he sent a message to his forces, dispersed across the galaxy, ordering them to come to him. Though many of his captains were curious as to why they were commanded to abandon the expeditionary fleets to which they were attached, they did obey, and the imperial commanders that found themselves without their transhumans allies suffered for it, but accepted that surely Sanguinius must have some great and grave reason for such a muster. Nonetheless, not all blood angels could be gathered. There were some who were too far to hear the astropathic call, or too deeply engaged in battle to withdraw, even at their own Primarch's command. Finally, when almost 100,000 Astartes in total had gathered around the Night Legion's flagship, the Red Tier, the fleet sailed towards the world indicated by Guilliman. It was a distant world, remote from the centers of imperial powers, on the fringes of the Imperium, in the shadows that hid so much, even in those last days of illumination. The Blood Angels would find the damnation that Guilliman had prepared for them. They would find Cygnus Prime, Azakilon, commander of the Sanguinary Guard. During the Great Crusade, Azakilon was ever Sanguinius' shadow, leader of the Order of Guardians that ever sought to protect their Primarch's life. A powerful warrior and a respected leader, his position held no true authority, yet none dared gainsay his command. Prior to the Primarch's discovery, he had been acting as the Legion Master, and was the one responsible for the establishment of the Blood Guardians, the order of apothecaries tasked with finding a cure for the Red Thirst. Azakilon was a shrewd politician as much as he was a great warrior, and he spent most of the Great Crusade acting from the shadows to protect the Legion's reputation from being tainted by the word of the Red Thirst leaving it, or by any association with unsavory characters. On the world of Myriadis, it was him who detonated the air recycling engines of the City of Triumphs, causing billions to choke to their death and sparing the Blood Angels a grueling campaign of siege, while Sanguinius believed it to have been a last, spiteful gesture by the enemy commanders. He is also believed to have been responsible for the death of several Space Marines from other legions, who, during joint operations, discovered the secret of the night. Of all the Blood Angels, the Sanguinary Guards were always the more loyal to their Primarch, placing his protection above all other concerns. And of them, Azakilon was the most loyal of all. The choices he made and the actions he took during the Great Crusade, the Heresy, and its aftermath must all be seen through the filter of that loyalty if his actions are to make any sense. The events of Cygnus Prime are now well known to the Imperium. Interrogations of captured Blood Angels who were present, visions from bound psychers, and the dangerous research of several radical inquisitors willing to risk their souls by summoning and questioning the Neverborn has still allowed us to know the grand lines of what occurred on the accursed world. What we know is that as soon as the Blood Angels emerged in the Cygnus system, they knew something had gone amiss. Where there was supposed to be a populated system with developed in-system space traffic, there was only the yawning expanse of the void, and planets entirely devoid of life. The Blood Angels believed that the region had been attacked and sought to investigate. Scouts were dispatched on the planets, only to be met with madness incarnate, as demons incarnated themselves inside the very rock of the world and hunted them down. Finally, as the ships were beginning to close in on Cygnus Prime, a signal was detected. It was a call for help, and it emanated from what, according to the Ultramarines' maps, should have been the planet's capital, a city of millions. At Sanguinius' command, the Blood Angels made planetfall. Tens of thousands of legionnaires descended upon Cygnus Prime, a tide of red ceramite that spread as far as the eye could see. They advanced on the source of the signal in perfect discipline, despite the doubts caused by the transformed environment through which they advanced. Clearly, some horrible fate had befallen Cygnus Prime's population, for the desecrated remnants were exposed all around the marching Blood Angels, like the word of an army of macabre and deranged artists. Skin had been stretched to form repulsive banners. Organs had been linked together by blood vessels used like string to create a grotesque display of the human body. Yet during all their walk, the Blood Angels did not see a single bone. The reason for this became obvious when they reached the origin of the distress call, which had suspiciously gone silent the moment they had set foot on the planet. Ignoring the warnings of his librarians, who could sense that something was horribly wrong with the world, and advised they leave it immediately and burn it from orbit. Sanguinius commanded them to continue, determined to learn of what had happened to this world, and to claim the secret of the Nephilim if it remained possible. In the center of what had once been the planetary capital stood a giant building constructed entirely out of human bones. Its shape echoed those of the cathedrals that once housed the worship of the followers of old Earth's false faiths. But while these were places of quiet meditation and contemplation, here was a monument of excess and twisted aesthetics. The remains of the dead had been arranged in suggestive and blasphemous poses, their skinless skulls somehow carrying over both agony and ecstasy at the same time. The aspect of the cathedral gave even the fearless warriors of the Ninth Legion pause. Before Sanguinius could give any order to his men, the ground around them exploded, and thousands of horrifying creatures that had so far been invisible to even the most sensitive equipment fell upon the legionnaires. Horned creatures with red skin, carrying swords of smoldering bronze that tore through the ceramide like paper, and took almost no damage from bolts, attacked the surprised space marines with unprecedented fury. Dozens of librarians died in blasts of psychic fire, their bodies torn apart as the more powerful spawns of the warp used them as gateways to the physical realm. Quickly, the Blood Angels assumed defensive positions, while Sanguinius and his inner circle struggled to reach the inside of the cathedral. They had clearly fallen into a trap, but the Primarch could sense that the origin of the creature was within the building. Within they found many horrific sculptures of bone, and at the center, where a priest would have addressed his flock had this been a true church and not a den of abomination, was a column of crimson fire raising from a deep pit. Even as the Blood Angels looked upon it, the fire was growing stronger, and Sanguinius felt that this was no normal fire, but a psychic phenomenon, linked to the souls of his sons, fighting outside. Before the pit was a creature that, in the later years, would come to be known to the Imperium as a keeper of secrets. Before the Blood Angels could attack it, it introduced itself as Kiris, daughter of the youngest god, drinker of the soul's broken steers, and emissary to the Blood Angels. It claimed to have orchestrated the whole situation in the Cygnus system, binding his barbarian kindred outside to its will. Ordering his sons to hold their rage, Sanguinius commanded Chrysis to explain its motives, or it will be destroyed. That was when the Keeper of Secrets made its offer to the Primarch of the Blood Angels. It spoke of the Emperor's lies, of how the galaxy was no godless place. It told Sanguinius of the primordial truth and the great powers that lurk within the warp, of how they had always watched him and his brothers. It spoke of a great war that would soon shake the galaxy, and that if he did not accept the offer of these powers, he and his whole legion would be destroyed by it, broken upon the anvil of judgment and cast across the stars to slowly die out. And then, it is said that if Sanguinius was but willing to give himself over to its master, all of this would have been avoided. The curse that even now was driving his sons to a greater and greater rage would be purged from them. The darkness within the Primarch's soul would be banished, and the chains placed upon him by both his father and the god of war would forever be shattered. Sanguinius looked through the openings in the cathedral's walls and saw that his sons were closing themselves to the rage burning within their gene code. The battle against the incarnations of rage was awakening. The flaws within them, and though victory would soon be theirs, the Primarch knew that once the last of the Neverborn had fallen, his sons would turn against each other, and then his legion would truly be lost. Though he felt anger at being so cornered, he also knew that he was seeing outside what would have happened anyway. The Neverborn were simply making it happen sooner, forcing him to look directly at the consequences of his inability to save his sons from the rage. And so, despite the inevitable price such a deal would have, he accepted Chris's offer. As the angel and his commanders faced the greater demon, One alone dared to speak against the madness that was taking place. An apothecary, present only because of the random chances of the conflict taking place outside the Cathedral of Bones. He called for his father to stop, to deny the monster its wish. The Blood Angels were strong, he argued. They could bear the weight of the curse, and through its rigors they would only become stronger. More than that, the creature couldn't be trusted, and the angel was too important to the galaxy's future to give himself up like this. But his words, for all their wisdom, went unheeded. Raldoron, first captain of the 9th Legion, moved to dispose of this interloper, this lowly apothecary who dared to think he knew better than the lords of the Legion. He underestimated the determination of the one pure soul in the room, however, and was shot just as he reached the apothecary. "No!" screamed Sanguinius, but it was too late. Already the other legionnaires present had opened fire, and the apothecary was torn apart in a volley of bolt shells. For a few seconds his body remained standing upright, and then he fell into the glowing pit, leaving the maimed corpse of First Captain Raldoron behind him. In the instant before the fall, Sanguinius saw the name etched on the warrior's shoulder plate, Meros. Then the pit began to glow with crimson light, and a great flame rose from it, spreading ever outward until it reached Sanguinius and the Blood Angels. Before it touched them, however, something suddenly snapped into place in the cosmos, and the rage fire that had accumulated at the bottom of the pit was violently expelled up in a raging torrent of infernal rage. Sanguinius felt something being drained from his essence, vanishing into the skies and replaced by a gaping void in his very soul. He suddenly felt free, as if a great burden had been removed from his shoulders. Despite the circumstances, he couldn't help a smile among the tears that ran down his cheeks. It had worked. Even if it had cost the lives of 2 of his sons, he could feel it. His sons were free from the curse of the Black Rage. Well, I think he means Red Thirst in this one, because the Black Rage comes further on. But yeah, the curse of the Red Thirst. No more would the Blood Angels lose themselves in berserk madness, and he would gladly pay any price that would demand of him in return. The sacrifice of 2 Blood Angels, one faithful to his Primarch, the other ready to stand against him in order to steer him away from the treacherous paths, sealed the deal between Sanguinius and the ruinous powers. The fury burning in the hearts of the Blood Angels in the system was expunged from their souls, and the battle that had threatened to make the Legion destroy itself ceased as thousands of Space Marines stopped mid-motion, sudden realization of what they were doing hitting them like a bolt to the face. The 9th Legion had survived Guilliman's trap. They had found what they had been looking for, though none of them yet knew the terrible price they would have to pay for it. So it was that Sanguinius first sold his soul to the dark god known as Slaanesh, the Prince of Excess, Lord of Profligacy, and Doom of the Eldar. It is said by these few who dare try to divine the planes of the Chaos Gods that initially Sanguinius and his sons had been marked by Kron, and should have joined the ranks of the Blood God's followers. Certainly, this theory makes sense in insight with the full knowledge of the genetic curse that afflicted the 9th Legion before the events of Cygnus Prime. Magi of the 1,000 Suns speak of how the Dark Prince stole the soul of Sanguinius from Khorne, causing the god of war to roar with such fury that the entire system of Cygnus Prime was destroyed. To this day, a very localized warp storm remains on Cygnus Prime, radiating the anger of a god wronged by his kin. The Heresy. Soon after the events of Cygnus Prime, Sanguinius noticed that his sons were growing restless. Ezekielon tried to conceal it to the eyes of the Primarch, but the angel knew his sons, and he could see that despite the fact that the rage had been removed from their souls, they were still tormented by some dark need. They thirsted, and no amount of water or wine could sate the burning of their throat, the agony that spread through their bodies. There were no physical symptoms of this affliction, and the warriors of the night were strong enough of mind that they were capable of enduring it. But as soon as he learned of it, Sanguinius knew, deep within himself, that he had been lied to, betrayed, but by the powers with which he had dealt, or by the one who had led him to their arms. Seeking answers, Sanguinius answered an invitation of Guliman. With the full force that had followed him to Cygnus Prime and had been purged, the angel went to the system, whose name would echo forevermore in imperial history, Ishvan. Perhaps Sanguinius sought to punish his brother for his lies, or perhaps he wanted an explanation. Their fleets met on their way to Ishvan and faced each other tensely. Several hundred ships arranged themselves in perfect battle formation as two legions looked possible destruction in the eye while their paramarchs conferred. "Look," Guliman said, gesturing towards a corner of the room. A space marine entered. "No," Sanguinius corrected himself. This was not a space marine, though it had the same bulk. Fire wreathed it like a shroud, and a fanged skull was placed where its head should be. The crackling of the flames was like the distant echoes of screams, the sound of which were hauntingly familiar. To the angel's preternatural senses, the creature radiated fury and hatred, and it shook him that he had not noticed his presence until now. At the edge of his sight, he noticed runic patterns on the floor where it had emerged. Had Guliman learned the secrets that so far had been the provenance of only the Cyclops and his sons? "What is this, Robute?" "Look, brother," Guliman insisted. "Do you not recognize it?" "Should I? This creature is of the warp, a spawn of the Empyrean. I am hurt, father." Sanguinius froze. Warped though it was, he knew that voice, though it was impossible for its owner to be there. Then he saw it, the emblem of the droplet of blood and wings engraved upon the creature's shoulder, and beneath it, a name, Meros. "You are dead," he whispered, the implication of what he was looking at freezing him in place. "I saw you die, my son." The flames around the demon burned brighter, and his voice was filled with rage and smoldering contempt when he spoke again. "Meros is dead, cowardly angel. He sacrificed his life to turn you away from the wretched path you and your sons have chosen to embrace. You denied the glory of the blood god Sanguinius. Heed my words. The day will come when you and your sons will rue this fool's choice. Your legion will suffer and burn, and your skull will..." Robute spoke a single word, in a language that Sanguinius didn't recognize, but yet understood perfectly. At his command, the beast went silent mid-sentence. The Primarch of the Ultramarines turned to his brother again. "This is the reason I sent you to Cygnus Prime. Despite the risks, Sanguinius. I knew this would be your legion's future if I did not. Whatever consequences there has been for freeing your sons from this madness, surely they were worth it. I will help you deal with them, I promise. But our father, if he should ever learn of what you had no choice but to do..." The exact contents of the exchange are not known to the Imperium, but it is clear that Guliman appeased his brother's fury somehow. He told Sanguinius of his coming rebellion, of the allies he had gathered already, and of the reasons behind it. He claimed that the Emperor would destroy the Blood Angels, for in his hypocrisy the master of mankind would not allow any other than him to be perfect. Only by standing with Guliman and helping him throw down the tyrant that claimed to rule all of mankind could the Ninth Legion hope to survive. The affliction that had seized the Blood Angels could be solved, if not cured entirely. What was it? Oh yeah. But the master of mankind would never accept the necessary sacrifices that would have to be made in order for the glorious Ninth Legion to continue its work as the peerless champions of humanity they had proven to be, time and again. The Archtraitor reminded his brothers of the secrets of the legions, breaking the oath he and all Primarchs had sworn never to speak of these dark matters again. Finally, Sanguinius caved in, faced with the destruction of his legion. He believed that he had to harden his heart and do what was best for both the Blood Angels and all of the Imperium. And so it was that the angel sold his soul to chaos for a second time. This time the price would be the lives of those of his sons who haven't been with him on Cygnus Prime. 4 legions gathered at Ishvan as the Archtraitor's plan's first phase. The Ultramarines, the Imperial Fists, the Iron Hands, and the Blood Angels. These few companies that had been unable to answer the Primarch's call had not received the blessing that had purged the rest of the Legion from their rage. And Guilliman convinced his brother that they couldn't be trusted with doing what had to be done for the Imperium's future. So it was that Sanguinius called once more for his sons, who had done all they could to be able to answer their father's next call. They rushed to his side, eager to be reunited with their Primarch, and learn what reason the entire legion had been summoned. Before they could even meet Sanguinius, however, the orders come from their next campaign. They were sent to Ishvan III, a world that had rebelled against the Imperium and needed to be put to the sword in order for the rest of the galaxy to understand that none could defy the will of the Legiones Astartes. It is not known whether Sanguinius refused to face the sons he sent out to die out of shame. It is not known whether Sanguinius refused to face the sons he set out to die out of shame, or because he feared they would sense the change within him. All that is known is that the martyred Blood Angels descended upon Ishvan III, and with all the fury that their brethren had lost, and fought nobly against the agents of the rebellion who had instigated the planet's turning from the Imperium. When death came from the sky as their own brothers revealed their treachery, many of the Blood Angels were unable to believe what was happening to them. Only because of the leadership of one of the Legion's greatest commanders, Amit of the 5th Company, were hundreds of them able to take shelter in time to survive the viral bombing and the deluge of the fire that followed it. In the aftermath of the bombardment, when the Imperial Fists were sent by Dorn to finish the survivors, the Blood Angels fought alongside those few others who had also survived the initial betrayal. A few lost themselves to the Black Rage, Redthirst, in this bleakest of battles, but legends tell that none of those who succumbed to the madness within their blood turned against their allies, instead rushing toward the enemy and meeting honorable deaths to the last. Although Sanguinius himself never set foot on Ishvan III, Ezekielon decided to send some of his brothers' captains and their forces on the ground to help their new allies in the rebellion, and cement the Legion's position in this new age. These company took heavy losses while facing their erstwhile brethren, for without the righteous fury that had once granted them strength, they were diminished, and while still formidable warriors, were hard-pressed to match the desperate rage and untainted brotherhood of the Loyalists. Beyond that, the sensation of thirst that held them had only increased as they led their brothers to their doom, and it was beginning to drive some of them insane, slowly dropping into catatonia as they became unable to bear it any longer. Guilliman saw what was happening to his brother's legion, and decided to take measures to prevent the Blood Angels from destruction. After all, he still needed the help of the 9th Legion in order to overthrow his father's rule. While his brother remained secluded in his chambers, Guilliman contacted those who led the Legion in his absence, and revealed to them how to slake the thirst that consumed them. It was on Ishvan V that the Blood Angels would finally reveal to their allies what had become of them. At the end of the massacre, with tens of thousands of legionnaires lying dead or dying, and victory secured by the traitors, the noble sons of Baal could not hold their thirst any longer. They fell upon the corpses of the dead, enemies, allies alike, and gorged themselves on their blood in a ravenous orgy. Such was the curse that had replaced the Black Rage, Red Thirst, an eternal thirst that could only be sated through the act of drinking the blood of other sapient creatures. Is the Red Thirst again. They exchanged the Red Thirst for the Red Thirst. Smart move. The other legions were disgusted by this spectacle, but none more so than Sanguinius himself, as he saw what had become of his sons. Despair overwhelmed him, and his mind, already weakened by the thirst he suffered himself, broke. For the rest of the heresy, the angel remained in his quarters, slipping deeper and deeper into insanity, trapped in an imaginary world where his sons were still the noble champions they had been before he sold their souls to chaos and returned for a false salvation. Azekilon and the rest of the Sanguinary Guard worked hard to conceal their father's state from the rest of the Legion and their allies in the rebellion. They claimed that the Primarch had been wounded in battle of Ishvan and was recovering, sending heralds in his place to the war councils of Gulliman's cohorts. The Flesh Terror roared his hatred at the skies as he slew another of the plague-wrecked creatures that infested the ruins of Ishvan. A red haze had descended upon him in the wake of the death of his brothers, the last of his brothers, now that those whom he had once called such had turned upon him. The self-control and discipline he had so hardly learned at the side of the World Eaters, and which had served him so well in the nightmarish battles that had followed the initial bombardment, had vanished altogether, when he had woken up, alone and alive, atop his brothers' corpses. Pain, not merely physical, but lodged deep within his soul, was driving him on, forcing him to keep moving, to keep destroying those who served the dark powers that had brought him so low. His very awake moment was filled with the echoes of the dead, and his dreams, when he succumbed to exhaustion when he stood, were naught but fire and ruin. A sound dragged his attention away from the slaughter of his latest victim. He knew that sound, but it seemed impossible it would be there. Ceramite boots, crushing the rubble of what had once been a beautiful city underfoot. He turned to face the newcomer, and hatred soared within his veins when he saw that it was another Astartes, like those who had betrayed him and killed all of his brothers. "Who are you?" he bellowed. Part of him was screaming at him, telling him to attack, to rend this warrior limb from limb. No one remained on this blasted world that deserved to him, let alone the Flesh Terror himself. But he held his hand. He didn't recognize the dull gray color of the stranger's armor, nor the sigil on his shoulder, although he felt he should. The weight on his thoughts was obstructing his memory, pressing on his mind, and demanding retribution for all that had been done to him, and more importantly, to his brothers. "Nasiramit, known as the Flesh Terror, once of the Blood Angels," said a voice that was at once full of strength, and yet not without warmth. "My name is Alexis Polus, and I am here at the behest of Malcador the Sigillite. I have come for you, brother." And with these words, the Flesh Terror remembered who he was and what he has been. Without the Primarch to lead them, the Blood Angels soon fell to the thirst. Now that they knew how it could be sated, and the pleasure they experienced from doing so, any second spent enduring it was intolerable. While the Iron Hands and Ultramarines advanced on Terra, the Blood Angels attacked hive world after hive world, feasting upon their population and filling their ship holds with slaves for later consumption. Those of the Blood Angels with psychic abilities learned how to channel the unholy energies that coursed through them during the act of blood drinking, and became capable of rending the veil of reality apart to summon the never-born servants of ruin. Corrupt chaplains of the Ultramarines taught those of the 9th Legion of the Dark God Slanesh, and worship spread across the Blood Angels, a way to rationalize the atrocities they committed by making them a divine duty and not decadent indulgence of their flesh weakness. So it was that the Blood Angels made the transition from Astartes to Chaos Marines, while their Primarch refused to face the gravity of his errors. The rise of the demon. And the scions of decadence and perversion, who had once been the proudest and noblest servants of the God Emperor, came to join in the final battle. But they did not bring their blades to bear at the walls of the palace. Instead, consumed by madness and evil, they turned upon the people of Holy Terra, and the Lord of War wept in horror as they fed upon those who could not defend themselves. Excerpt from the Canticle of the Dead. At long last, after years of bloody battle across the galaxy, the war came to Terra. The throne world hadn't been untouched since the heresy had been declared. Traitors had attempted to bring it down from within, and spies and assassins had fought a terrible conflict in the shadows, while Perturabo raised his mighty walls. Nonetheless, this would be the first time since the proclamation of unity that open warfare was brought to Terra. All of the traitor legions were represented at the siege, though few were there in full strength. The Space Wolves and the White Scars had scattered across the galaxy to do as they wished in the wake of their respective Primarchs' disappearance. Still, the forces at Guliman's command outnumbered the Loyalists greatly, but numbers wouldn't carry the battle for the fate of all mankind. Demigods fought on the walls of the Imperial Palace, and it would be their presence as much as the valor of their sons that would determine which side would emerge victorious. With the two fleets waging war in orbit, the traitor legions and their allies came down on Terra in a rain of steel and sorcerous lightning. Each force had received precise orders and was part of a carefully wrought plan conceived by Guliman and Dorn together. When Perturabo studied the original designs of the arch-traitor after the end of the siege, the Lord of Iron admitted that the battle would most likely have turned against the Loyalists had things occurred according to it. But it did not. For Guliman, despite all the dark knowledge granted to him by the Chaos Gods, had forgotten the true nature of all those who had gathered under his banner. He had forgotten that followers of Chaos are much like the gods that own them, selfish creatures who will always put their own agenda over any common cause. When the Blood Angels arrived on Terra, without their Primarch to lead them, for even Sanguinius remained in his quarters, having only deigned to show himself for the final war council, they did not follow their orders. Instead of converging on the Imperial Palace, they turned on Terra's people, their martial pride entirely consumed by the thirst. The billions of innocents that Perturabo had coldly chosen to leave defenseless became the playthings of the corrupt legionnaires, and blood flowed as they drank from all those who crossed their path. The rage of the Blood Angels' allies at their betrayal was great, and to this day many Space Marines still carry grudges. Many Chaos Marines still carry grudges against the Knight from the siege, remembering the brothers they lost in fights where the Blood Angels were supposed to support them. But while the Blood Angels did not follow Guliman's orders, their actions weren't entirely useless to the traitors. Beyond the damage done to the enemy morale, demons began to manifest from the planet-wide orgy of reckless sensations. Entire hosts of the Prince of Excess incarnated on Terra, and though most Neverborn joined the Blood Angels in their debauch, thousands attacked Imperial positions, driven by unknowable urges and pacts. In the Terra Apocrypha, a keeper of secrets called Crisis is mentioned as one of the demon lords who led such an assault on the Psychana Arcana, feasting on the souls of over 3,000 Psychers before it was destroyed by a group of 1,000 suns. The slaughter of innocents also had another consequence. Horus Lupercal, who so far had been leading the battle from within the palace's walls, saw the depredation of his brother's legion through 1,000 pig feeds. While Perturabo had enough self-control to ignore the atrocities taking place outside, the War Master was not so calm. Enraged, he left the command center to the Iron Lord and went straight for the ramparts. There he began to slay traitors by the dozens, using his Warhammer Worldbreaker and the legendary talon of Horus. All the while he roared for his brothers to come and face him, so that he may answer for his legion's crimes, because there were many. Aboard the red tier, Sanguinius heard his brother's call. Where all else had failed, Horus's voice pierced through the fog that had claimed his mind, and the angel came to Terra to face the one who had loved him most. With only his sanguinary guard at his side, Sanguinius met Horus at the Eternity Gate, and the two Primarchs were locked in mortal combat. Today, frescoes on this very emplacement depict the epic duel that was fought between the fallen angel and the War Master. It had been believed first and just during the Great Crusade that with all too much seriousness, that Horus and Sanguinius were each other's match when it came to single battle, as the greatest of the Primarchs. Angron was another contender for that title, but the Lord of the World Eaters was not on Terra yet, and so only Horus could face the angel. Yet as the duel raged on, it became obvious to all observers that Sanguinius had grown weaker since he had turned his back on the Emperor's light. His moves, while still far quicker than any legionnaires, were slow and hesitant compared to the deadly grace he had once displayed. His face, once so noble and proud, was transfixated in an expression of mute agony. After several minutes of conflict, Horus finally brought his brother down, shattering his sword to pieces with a mighty strike of Worldbreaker. Before he could deal the final blow, however, the War Master saw the face of his brother, looking up at him in despair and horror. For a fraction of a second, he remembered Sanguinius as he had been, and the memory stayed his hand. A fatal mistake. In that moment where destiny stood still on the blade's edge, the Lord of Angels sold his soul for the third and final time. A terrible voice sounded in Sanguinius' skull as the haze receded, and the true horror of what he had done was revealed to him at last. It was loud. It was loud enough to drown the screams of his conscience, to blind him to the image of his brother standing above him, Warhammer stopped mid-motion, a look of utter surprise and faint, disbelieving hope on his face. It came from all around him, from within as well. It was beautiful and horrifying at once. Its promises were the quintessence of truth and the greatest of all lies. I will end it all. I will give you back everything you want. I will make all your dreams true. You just have to do this little thing for me first. Something broke within Sanguinius. He couldn't bear it anymore. He had thought that he was strong once, that he could face the truth and carry on. He had been wrong. He was weak. He had fallen. And now all that remained was to fall even further down. The thirst was too strong. The horror too great. He wanted it to end. But he knew without knowing how that death would not release him. There was only one way for him to be free. He turned his back on the truth and embraced the lie. The angel screamed his last as the demon's fangs tore through his brother's throat. Blood flowed down his throat, rich and potent, loaded with the untold promises of a better future, of all the potential that died in that single moment. Future glories burned as the life of Horus Lupercal was drained by the monster that had once been his brother. Images flared in Sanguinius' mind, and he saw his brother's life pass behind his eyes. Such nobility. Such pride, too. Most of all, such love. Horus had loved him, before all had started to fall apart. The demon screamed as his wings started to change. Their white feathers became purple, and he felt every core being altered as the stolen... And he felt his very core being altered as the stolen life of his brother spread through him, giving him strength. He could feel all around him the souls of the millions of mortals his sons were killing to slake the thirst that could never be sated. They passed through him, consumed to fuel his transformation. He was no longer mortal, as much as a Primarch could be. He was more now, and less at the same time. He had become a principle of being, a creature of thought over matter. His perceptions began to blur as new planes of existence, which he had only glimpsed before, were fully revealed to him. For one glorious moment, he saw everything as gods did, and the sight exalted and horrified him in equal measure. And then, a veil fell upon him. As the Dark Prince kept his word, the truth vanished from his sight, and the lie he had so dearly clung to enveloped him like a mortuary shroud. Madness descended, and it would never leave him again. Horus's death nearly broke his legion apart. Thousands of legionnaires screamed in rage, sorrow, and denial, and Abaddon, first captain of the 16th Legion, gave the order to charge, to reclaim their father's body and destroy the monster that had killed him. He was held back, both by his brothers of the Mournival and the unwavering command of Perturabo. With hatred burning in their souls, the sons of Horus held their positions. But even so, they were faltering, doubt and dread filling their hearts in the aftermath of their Primarch's demise. Sanguinius had remained on the front lines, laughing madly as he altered between tenderly cradling his brother's corpse and butchering any loyal space marines that crossed his field of vision. Worse, the Blood Angels had felt their Primarch's ascension to demonhood and rushed to the walls of the Imperial Palace in a disorganized horde, eager to taste the blood of their cousins and experience even a shadow of what Sanguinius had. And then, just as all hope seemed to be lost, the forces of the 3rd and 8th Legion arrived. Like vengeful angels, the Night Lords fell upon their debased kin, striking the Blood Angels in the back as they advanced on the Imperial Palace. Given fresh courage by their allies' arrival, the 4 greatest sons of Horus, the legendary Mournival, struck out at the one who had slain their father and liege. Together they ripped Sanguinius' black heart and shattered the remnants of his mortal frame, casting his essence into the Sea of Souls. Moments before being forced back anew by the other traitor legions, who sought to defeat these champions while they were still weakened from the titanic battle they had just fought. With Sanguinius' destruction, the Blood Angels fell, struck by horrible agony as they shared the Primarch's experience through the bond they all shared with him. The 9th Legion was on its knees, and the Loyalists took full advantage of it, slaying thousands of the Slaaneshi traitors in mere hours. When Guilliman fell, the Blood Angels were among the quickest to flee, and many Chaos Marines have raised the hypothesis that this is because they were already running before the Arch-Traitor's death. Nevertheless, by the time the traitor legions were on the run, Terra was a smoking wasteland, filled with the scent of blood and the cries of the dying. To the loyal legionnaires that walked its surface, the siege of Terra definitely did not feel like a victory. The fact that before fleeing, the Blood Angels had been able to steal away Horus Lupercal's corpse only compounded that feeling in the Sons of Horus's mind. Echoes of blood. Even 10,000 years after the siege, the trauma inflicted by the 9th Legion to the throne world remains. Despite the many exorcisms performed by the most powerful psychers and most devout priests of the Imperium, the people of Terra still have nightmares of that terrible event. Most of those who suffer from them forget them as they wake up. The physical nearness of the God Emperor enough to shelter their soul from the darkness. But there are those who remember their nightmares and are slowly driven insane by the horrific visions, as Slaanesha's touch slowly spread into their heart. Several hundred Inquisitors of the Ordo Vigilius are permanently stationed on Terra, searching for those unfortunate souls and taking them off-world for execution. As per a rule that is due to religious symbolism as much as to esoteric precaution, shedding blood on Terra is forbidden. Even those who remain pure in front of the dark dreams are afflicted with an instinctive distrust of all legionaries, for they remember in their very soul what the Blood Angels did to their ancestors. The echoes are especially strong on the ground where Sanguinius slew Horus. A cathedral to the Emperor was built on the very spot filled with homages to the first War Master, and the prayers to his memory haven't stopped once in 10,000 years. Despite this, any soul sensitive enough can feel the darkness beneath the church's floor. Pilgrims believe that Horus's shadow yet protects the Imperium, and the Ecclesiarchy encourages this belief, claiming that this is the reason why Sanguinius remains in the Eye, never leaving it in 10 millennia. For all that the Inquisition knows, this may very well be true, and as the echoes of blood grow stronger, and the 41st millennium reaches its end, even the most pragmatic logician finds himself praying for the help of the first Primarch. The post-heresy. 9 times the space that measures day and night, to mortal men he with his horrid crew lay vanquished rolling in their fiery gulf, confounded though immortal. Extract from the Terra Apocrypha, I guess. With Guilliman dead and the Sea of Souls roaring in fury, the traitor legions fled the Sol system. The Ultramarines, having recovered the body of their master, retreated straight to the Ruinstorm, where the demon hunter remnants of Ultramar would provide them cover from the Imperium's retribution. As for the rest of the traitor legions, although they would ultimately end up in the Eye of Terror, each followed its own path to this place of damnation. For the Blood Angels, led by Azekilion, this path brought them first to Baal. Why the commander of the Sanguinary Guard directed his fleet there rather than straight to the Eye, where their demon Primarch was waiting, is unclear, but it was a move that would serve the 9th Legion well. The Blood Angels stripped their fortresses on Baal's moon of weapons, ammunition, and gene seed, and nearly emptied the planet itself of life, filling their ships' holds with human livestock. They also found someone they hadn't expected, Fabius Bile, once chief apothecary of the Emperor's children. Believed to have died in the bleeding wars that had pitted his legion against the Dark Eldars, Fabius had survived his captivity, but the experience had changed him beyond recognition, tearing out the mask of the healer and revealing the insane genius that lurked beneath. Bile sought to understand the genetic work that made the Astartes into what they were, and when he had learned that the Blood Angels had claimed the corpse of a Primarch, the possibilities such material represented had made him come to Baal, confident that the Legion would go back there sooner or later. Azekilion met Fabius, who had come alone aboard a stolen, and now crashed, Eldar ship. Their exchange is lost to history, but the commander agreed to bring the apothecary with him to the Eye of Terror, where his sorcerers told him that Sanguinius waited for them. As for access to Horus's remains, Bile would have to wait for the demon's Primarch's choice in the matter. Fabius accepted the offer, and during the Blood Angel's journey to the Eye, began to experiment on wounded Blood Angels, forgotten by apothecaries that now cared little for their former duties. Those who survived his experiments would form the base of Bile's own warband, choosing to follow this strange apothecary rather than the commanders who had left them to die slowly of their wounds. A few apothecaries who had spearheaded the research into a cure that was now all but forgotten also approached the son of Fulgrim, sharing with him knowledge of gene forging they have accumulated during the Great Crusade. Finding the world where Sanguinius had reappeared wasn't easy. It took several decades of real space-time before the 9th Legion was reunited with its Primarch. It was during this quest that the Imperial Fists made their attempt at breaking free of the Iron Cage, only to be humbled by Perturbo's defenses, causing the 7th Legion to shatter when Sigismund turned against Dorn in the aftermath. At first, the Legion was delighted to have found Sanguinius at last, and none more so than Azekilion, who could finally beg his lord's forgiveness for his failure to protect him from the Mournival. However, when the commander of the Sanguinary Guard met his father in person, He quickly saw that the angel had not emerged unscathed from his transformation and subsequent destruction. The madness that had afflicted Sanguinius during the heresy, and that Execulion had believed banished by the Battle of Terra and his master's ascension, had returned tenfold. Sanguinius couldn't perceive the universe around him, his perceptions clouded by a veil of illusions. Shocked, Execulion and the rest of the guard decided to keep this a secret from the rest of the legion. However, Fabius Bile already knew, and while Execulion considered simply killing the former apothecary, Bile made a counter-offer. In return for an audience with the Demon Primarch, so that he may seal his alliance with the Ninth Legion, Bile swore he wouldn't reveal Sanguinius' condition to the rest of the Blood Angels. This oath was sworn and sealed in blood, binding Bile's fate to that of his word. What happened when Bile met Sanguinius is lost to history, and the subject of much speculation. Whatever the renegade offered, the Demon Primarch accepted his deal, and the apothecary was given full access to Horus's corpse to do with it as he pleased. And so, while the Blood Angels got used to their new existence in the Eye of Terror, Fabius Bile worked to unlock the Emperor's secrets. Ultimately, he succeeded in cloning Horus Lupercal, creating a horde of malformed simulacras and a handful of viable legionnaires. This act was the one that gave Fabius his title of primogenitor. The man. Wasn't he more than a man? He couldn't remember. Looked up from the chessboard again, staring at the angel sitting in front of him across the table. The angel was impossibly beautiful, and the man felt weeping in joy simply by looking at his face. He wanted nothing more than to keep playing, to relish in the pleasure of the angel's company forever. And yet, there was something tugging at the edge of his mind. A distant memory that he couldn't quite remember. It prevented him from simply enjoying the instant, constantly attempting to drag him towards the past. You, he began to say, as realization finally dropped him. An image flashed in his mind. The angel before him at his feet, looking up at him. Only if it wasn't an angel. It was a demon wearing an angel's skin, and his fangs had tore his throat and drunk his blood. A rage flowed through him like a lava flow, and he hurled himself at the creature in front of him, hands aimed at its throat. You killed me! Something blurry passed in front of his face, and he had a moment to watch his own beheaded corpse fall to the ground, in a clash of hastily assembled power armor, before blackness surrounded him. Sanguinius tipped the head over with a foot, watching it in silence for a few seconds, before turning away from it and walking towards the next room, where another image of his beloved brother awaited for him. Perhaps this time it would work. Perhaps this time his brother would love him. With these new forces under his command, Bile called upon the second part of his bargain with Sanguinius. At the Primarch's orders, thousands of Blood Angels joined the former apothecary in what would be known as the First Black Crusade in Imperial Archives, and the Clone Wars to the legions involved in it. Cadia was one of many worlds fortified by the Iron Warriors, was the first victim of his attack. The Imperial commander of the planet had been corrupted by Slaneshi cults and led half the planetary garrison to rebel against those who had remained loyal, opening the warp corridor to the forces of the Arch-Renegade. With the fall of Cadia, the Blood Angel forces were able to conquer dozens of systems, forcing the Iron Warriors to call upon the help of the Sons of Horus and Emperor's children. During the long bloody conflict, the cloned Astartes, the Fabius, began to carve their legend, creating the infamous Black Legion, that, to this day, continue to taunt the Sons of Horus with their existence. Although billions of civilians died to the Blood Angels' depredation during the Clone Wars, the issue was never in doubt. The Blood Angels faced the might of 3 combined legions, and the batch of twisted monstrosities created by Fabius Bile could not balance such odds. In the end, however, the death blow of the Black Crusade came from within its own ranks, as would so often be the case in the future. The War of Woe had begun between the Blood Angels and the Imperial Fist, starting off the Legion Wars, that still rage in the Eye of Terror 10,000 years later. Ezekielion, speaking with Sanguinius' authority, called back most of the Blood Angel forces under Fabius' command, leaving him defenseless against an assault led by the Primarch of his former legion himself. His cloning facilities destroyed, the arch-renegade had no choice but to flee for his life with his few remaining servants. The most ironic thing is that it was under Bile's orders that the genetic facilities of the Imperial Fists were attacked, to gather more varied genetic material for his twisted experiments. But despite this setback, his mad genius would continue to serve him well in the underworld. To this day, he is a powerful Chaos Lord in the Eye, with warriors of all the traitor legions serving under his command, scouring the Eye and the Imperium for whatever their Dark Master desires. All legions trade with him for his knowledge, bartering goods and spoils of war in return for access to his facilities, where new Chaos Marines are created out of infant slaves and offered gene seed. As for the Ninth Legion, with the end of the War of Woe came the revelation of Sanguinius' mental state to his legion. It is said that Bile was responsible, as revenge for the destruction of his clones of Horus, which he thought would help him restore the lore lost during the Clone Wars, and to bring more warriors under his banner. Whether this is true or just another sin laid at the foot of the arch-renegade, of which he is, for once, innocent, is a fact known only to his own twisted mind. Trar whatever, looked through the oculus, boiling with rage as the image of the demon world disappearing as the ship left the system. No, not left. Ran. He had been forced to run after the madman who called himself Primogenitor had showed just how much concern he had for the lore of Trarar had brought to him, seeking a partnership. It had seemed so obvious to him. Both Bile and himself sought to unravel the mystery of the Emperor's genetic work. Surely by working together they would achieve their respective ends more quickly. But he had underestimated the depths of pride and self-delusion to which the former apothecary of the Emperor's children had sunk. Bile would not allow for anyone other than himself to have access to the secrets of the Master of Mankind. His arrogant genius would not allow anything like a colleague, and Trar would not lower himself before the renegade. Vengeance would be his for this affront, he swore, and cold ice flowed through his veins as he refocused his thoughts, taking the fire out of the anger that had threatened to awaken the beast within him. He turned to his Vox officer and ordered the transmission of a certain audio file on all frequencies. For all of Bile's admitted genius in the matters of genetic perversion, the son of Fulgrim lacked either interest or talent in the more mundane aspect of technology. It had been easy to hack into the systems of his armor and extract hours of logs, including a very interesting conversation between Fabius and the leader of Sanguinius' bodyguards. Let's see what would happen once the Blood Angels knew just why their Primarch had spent most of the War of Woe on their homeworld. He would need to run far, Trar mused. The consequences of his message would be far-reaching, and he did not doubt that many would seek to punish him for it, should its origins ever be revealed. The Eye had many places to hide, but he doubted one could hide from what could very well be an entire legion, if things went truly against him. Besides, the mutagenic energies of the warp were stronger than anywhere else here, and while studying their effects on the was fascinating to find what he wanted. Studying their effects was fascinating. He doubted he would be able to endure them long enough to find what he wanted. No, he and his wolf brothers needed to leave the Eye, but that wasn't a problem for him. He had learned several paths in and out of the warp storm. That left the question of his destination. Perhaps the wolf priest thought it was time for him to pursue this old goal of his. The Hallowed Stars seemed like a promising lead on his quest to free his brothers from the beast within their souls. Such was the egoism of the Blood Angels at this point that they didn't care that their lord was a deranged godling trapped in visions of a false reality, but that the Legion's fragile unity was shattered by the truth. Without the fear of Sanguinius' wrath, banished back to the tides of unreality for 100 years by Rogal Dorn's fist in the cataclysmic mutual destruction, the Blood Angels no longer felt the need to follow any chain of command, and they dispersed across the Eye of Terror and beyond. This was the end of the Blood Angels as a united legion, and in their place formed 100 warbands of self-righteous monsters, all as Slaanesh had designed. The Devil's Crag Incident. In 9055 of the 31st millennium, a warband led by the Chaos Lord Dante of the Blood Angels attacked an imperial world known as Gehenna. With the help of his sorcerer Mephiston, Dante plunged the warp currents into turmoil, cutting the planet of any imperial reinforcements so that he and his troops may plunder it at their leisure. For 3 years, the Imperium was unable to pierce the veil and reach the planet, despite numerous attempts. Gehenna was an important industrial world, and its loss was affecting productivity on other worlds across several systems. When navigators finally announced that the warp had calmed enough to allow passage, the gathered fleet sailed at once, hoping to at least punish the traitors before they could escape. When they arrived, however, they found no sign of Dante and his warband. Gehenna was ruined, with no trace at all of its former inhabitants. All gone, and not even a corpse remaining. The Inquisition quarantined the planet and sent search teams, but half of them vanished without a word, and the other half never found anything. The only clue is an astropathic message left by Dante before leaving the system. Enraged, the Chaos Lord swears revenge against a being he calls the Silent King, without any explanation as to its nature or origins. The Inquisition is still of several minds as to the identity of the Silent King. Some believe him to be a rival warlord, others some Xenos princeling, while others still think it to be another derogatory name attributed by the traitor to the God Emperor. Organization. The Sanguinor, Herald of Sanguinius. A mysterious figure of the Ninth Legion, wearing a golden mask and harboring wings of golden feathers that drip with a drug potent enough to drive a space marine mad. In his presence, all those who follow the path of the Dark Prince are driven to kneel and abase themselves, and thoughts of disobedience are impossible. For that reason, the Sanguinor also bears the title of Herald of Sanguinius, as only the fallen Primarch of the Ninth Legion was once said to possess such inhuman charisma. The Sanguinor is always accompanied by a retinue of Blood Angels, who are so awed by his presence that they do not succumb to the infighting that usually follows any gathering of such narcissist warriors. The masked warlord uses them to speak in his name, although whether this is because he cannot speak for his own or because some inflated ego remains unknown. The Inquisition has recorded appearances of this individual. Why is this so hard right now? Of this individual, whatever, let's go with that, all over the galaxy, and the Thousand Suns have confirmed that he has also been present in the Eye of Terror. The idea that he can bypass the Iron Cage at will is a disquieting one, and the Inquisition has been on the hunt for a very long time. Appearances of the Sanguinor are now reason enough to call for powerful forces, for he never shows up without being involved in some grand plan, such as the Black Crusade or the recovery of a powerful Chaos artifact. Never has the Sanguinor been at the command of any such fell design, but he has allied himself with Chaos Lords from all traitor legions at some point, as well as mortal warlords with the Dark Prince's favor. Only the best warriors of the loyal legions can hope to best the Sanguinor in combat, for his very skill with the demon blade he carries on the battlefield. However, each time the Sanguinor was reported to have been defeated, no body was recovered, and the Golden Warrior appeared once more at another place in space and time. The Ordo Malus has many theories as to the nature of the Sanguinor. Some believe him to be just another Chaos champion, favored enough by the Dark Prince that he is brought back from the dead every time he falls in battle. Others claim that it is a title, that the Golden Mask is passed from one wearer to another when the previous incumbent dies. Some even believe him to be a demon prince, which would explain his apparent immortality and strange powers, but contradict reports from the bound psychers who have been near him. A persistent theory apparently popular among the Blood Angels themselves is that he is a shard of Sanguinius himself, the part of the demon Primarch that has accepted the truth of his situation and embraced the Dark Prince wholly. Incarnated within the flesh of a Blood Angel, this shard, they whisper, will one day unite the Legion again and lead it to unprecedented glory. This dreadful possibility, however unlikely, is cause enough for many Inquisitors to have dedicated themselves to the creature's destruction. The Grey Knights themselves owe a debt of blood to the creature, and its name is listed among those of the chapter's foes in their fortresses of Titan. Of the 300 companies that once made the Ninth Legion, a peerless fighting force, only a pale shadow remains. The Blood Angels are fractured beyond anyone's ability to unite by their own pride and the knowledge of their Primarch's madness. The grievous losses they took during the heresy and the subsequent wars in the Eye have much reduced their number, and this combined with their arrogance tend to make them only associate with each other in small groups. But while one may be forgiven for thinking that this would make them any less of a threat to the Imperium, to believe so is a great mistake. Although Slaanesh has all but destroyed the Legion that has dedicated itself to him, the Blood Angels have been reforged into a powerful tool of corruption, capable of gathering hordes of mortal slaves far beyond what the other traitor legions can achieve. Even within the Eye, where millions of Chaos Marines pay fealty to the ruinous powers, the Blood Angels remain a power to contend with, their alliance with Fabius Bile ensuring them a steady supply of fresh recruits. Despite their small numbers, the Blood Angels have almost as many warlords in their ranks as the other traitor legions, and legends of their fell deeds are told across the length and breadth of the Imperium, despite the Inquisition's best efforts to quell them. The Sons of Sanguinius make for good commanders of the damned, and are capable of drawing a large number of worshippers to their banner, all while being individually formidable warriors. Hundreds of them, only a fraction of a legion's force, but enough to be a nightmare for the Imperium, have left the Eye and its endless battles entirely behind. They hide among the Imperium's borders, ruling over pirates and renegades. These isolated warriors are beacons to the scum of the Imperium, gathering them and making them into something approaching an effective fighting force. More than once, the Imperial Navy has been forced to take action after an increase in piratical activity in one sector, only to learn that the son of Sanguinius was responsible for it, his presence forcing the pirates to greater risks in order to sate their master's endless appetite. The glamour of Sanguinius. During the Great Crusade, Sanguinius proved to have inherited one of the Emperor's traits. Like the Master of Mankind, his appearance was fluid, changing according to his moods and those of his observers, but always magnificent. Kings and overlords who had ruled their world with an iron fist for decades would weep at the beauty of Sanguinius, and command their armies to lay down their weapons and welcome the Imperium. Many of the Blood Angels shared that handsomeness of the handsomeness of their Primarch, though none of them possessed his shifting abilities. That changed after their fall to chaos, when the dark blessings of Slaanesh wove their way into their genetic coding. Soon after, the Blood Angels retreated to the Eye of Terror in the wake of their father's destruction at the gates of the Imperial Palace. A new ability spread amongst the Ninth Legion. It is said that a part of Sanguinius' demonic essence was distillated into his sons upon his defeat, and that they granted them part of his powers. Even the Blood Angels created now 10,000 years after the angels' first defeat, still inherit that gift from the gene seed that turned them into Chaos Marines. Once this ability manifests, the Blood Angels project a psychic field that alters the image any observer sees when looking upon them. They appear to be beautiful, pristine warriors, clad in perfect armor engraved with the suggestive sigils of chaos. The very idea of attacking such a being seems blasphemous to the unguarded psyche, and it isn't unheard of for veterans of the Imperial Guard to remain motionless as even one of Sanguinius' sons drains them of blood, a beatific smile on their face. This effect is known as the glamour of Sanguinius, and it is one of the greatest tools of the Blood Angels in their infiltration of Imperial society. Only psychers or individuals warded against such manipulations can see the Blood Angels as they really are. Hideous, gaunt monsters whose eyes burn with their unholy desires. Powerful individuals can rip off the glamour entirely, allowing those around them to share the truth of the traitor's nature. This act always enrages the Blood Angels, for they are the first to fall to the glamour, and do not like to be deprived of their beauty, of their beautiful lie, and forced to face the reality of their monstrosity. Homeworld. The Mausoleum of the Faithful. Unlike the other legions that purge their own ranks of loyalist elements, the Imperium knows which companies of the Blood Angels were martyred at Ishvan, although the source of that knowledge has been lost to time. After the heresy, a mausoleum was built on Baal, amidst the ruins of the Blood Angels' fortresses. There the name of every faithful Blood Angel is engraved upon adamantium, that may be remembered unto eternity. It is a secret place, known only to a handful of Inquisitors and Legionnaires. Beyond the fact that the servants of Chaos would obviously attempt to defile it, should they ever learn of its existence, it also serves as a repository for all the knowledge accumulated on the Ninth Legion. Records from the Great Crusade are kept there alongside accounts of the myriad horrors committed by the Blood Angels since their fall, kept locked in stasis behind dozens of purity seals, until an Inquisitor with the correct authorization codes can bring them back into reality for a brief moment. This has proven a valuable source of information to the members of the Ordo Malus and their eternal struggle against the servants of the Dark Prince. The mausoleum is maintained and defended by servitors and automated defenses. It is said that on occasion, the ghost of one of the Blood Angels fallen on Ishvan III will appear to guide a visitor through its labyrinthine depths and to achieve into the archive relevant to the quest. During the galactic cleansing that followed the end of the Roboutian Heresy, Baal was destroyed by the Sons of Horus. After that, many of the Blood Angels' strongholds in the Eye of Terror were lost during the Legion Wars. And when the Legion shattered, they lost even more to opportunistic attacks from the other legions. Other worlds were abandoned by their Astartes masters as they left, seeking new horizons to defy. Now, apart from a few demon worlds too deeply touched by Slaanesh to be contested, the only true stronghold of the Ninth Legion is the demon world where the Primarch dwells. There, reality is a slave to the disillusions of those touched by Sanguinius, presenting images of their deepest and darkest desires. The name of this cursed place is unknowable to any with any shred of sanity left. Even the Blood Angels themselves, who can feel a connection to it no matter how far they run, cannot conceive of it. Since the end of the War of Woe, only the Sanguinary Guard permanently remain with their father on the Legion's homeworld. Led by Ezekielion, who has remained loyal to his father despite everything, they protect their lord from intruders and inconvenient truths alike. To this day, Sanguinius lingers there, lost the glamour, his power such that reality itself twists around him to conform to his visions. There he relives the glorious days of the Great Crusade, as well as visions of the galaxy in which he remained true to the Emperor, while noble Horus was the one to succumb to the temptation of chaos instead. However, according to a recorded vision experienced and written down by Magnus himself, his brother does not know any peace in his exile in the underworld. The lingering remains of his conscience occasionally trying to wake him up, gathering great storms of nightmares that plunge the entire demon world into war as the Sanguinary Guard and whatever allies they can find fight back ghosts of the legions past and vengeful, fiery angels. It appears that Slaanesh lied when the Prince of Chaos offered Sanguinius a peaceful lie in return for Horus's life. But then again, such is the way of the powers of ruin. Beyond the Sanguinary Guard, the Demented Primarch and the demons that attend them, the demon world is also the resting place of the souls of all who died while victim to the glamour. Their shades are eternal slaves to the demons and sorcerers, populating cities of illusions, trapped forevermore in a spell of lies until their essence is consumed by the very planet. This energy is used to empower the magic that Slaanesh weaved into the planet in order for it to be used to his dark designs, despite the mental state of his master, of course. While most demon worlds in the Eye of Terror are somewhat anchored in space, in that a corrupted navigator of a fell sorcerer having already visited them can usually find their way back to them, the homeworld of the Ninth Legion flickers into existence across the warp storm, never appearing to the same place twice. When it appears near the eye's borders, entire systems can be plunged into its baleful shadow, spreading madness and corruption. Sages and seers alike have tried to establish a pattern to its appearances, but have so far failed to obtain anything of use. On several occasions, Inquisitors have successfully claimed to know the location of the next manifestation of what has come to be called the Harbinger Star. Each time, however, they have been revealed to be secret agents of Slaanesh, with links to the mysterious Sanguinar, and their revelations were only used to bring and trap faithful servants of the God Emperor on the world soon to be touched. God, this is a long one. The Predators of the Webway. While the Darkin of Comorak count amongst the Imperium's most bitter enemies, it is not unheard of for the craft-world Eldar to join with the Imperial forces against the common menace. Even if the Xenos are not to be trusted, their knowledge of the galaxy far suppresses our own, and the Inquisition has ever been known to forgive Imperial officers taking the liberty to deal with the Eldar on their own, with only minimal punishment. However, the Lost and the Damned have a vastly different view of the galaxy's oldest living species. Eldar are the enemy of chaos, and all disciples of ruin, revealed in bringing misery to the aliens, and none more than the devotees of Slaanesh. The youngest god, master of the Blood Angels, was born when the Eldar Empire fell, condemning the entire species to a slow extinction and an unavoidable damnation in the warp's darkest tides. For 10,000 years, the Xenos have denied the hunger of she who thirsts, trapping their souls into the spirit stones or starving off their deaths by offering the pain of others to the Dark Prince. And amongst the Blood Angels, it is considered a sacred duty to help accelerate this passage into oblivion. To the debased sons of Sanguinius, the blood of the Eldar is the sweetest wine, made rich by the intensity of every moment of an Eldar's long life, and many are ready to go to any length to taste it. Entire warbands have dedicated themselves to this hunt, and stalk the corrupted paths of the Webway, a galactic network of gates and portals, in search of access to the Eldar craft world. Along the demonic hordes, they gather information on the twisted paths of the labyrinthian dimension, their minds clearer than any of their kind outside of its dark confines. It is believed by the Inquisition that the Webway somehow clears their spirits, enabling them to think and reason as the warriors they once were rather than the beasts they have become. But when, at long last, a passage to a craft world is found, an event of tremendous rarity, for such ways are well guarded by the fearful Xenos, All their calm and poise is thrown to the winds. Billions of Eldar have died under the assault of the Dark Prince's ravenous hordes, and paths corrupted by the warp can never be made clean again. The mysterious Harlequins have spent many centuries battling the Blood Angels in this webway, luring them away from the paths leading to the Craftworld kin. Meanwhile, seers will journey far to seal existing portals they have foretold are at risk of being discovered by the great enemy, or conceal precious records from its servants. But it is a losing battle, and ultimately, the Eldar are doomed to extinction, and an eternity within the claws of the goddesses their ancestors' folly brought into nightmarish existence. Beliefs. Astartes, the Archpriest of Slaanesh. Among the few Blood Angels who do not call the Eye of Terror their home, none are more dangerous than Astartes, the so-called Archpriest of Slaanesh. Once a chaplain of the Ninth Legion, he has completely embraced the teaching of the Dark Prince, and strives to spread them to as many naive souls as possible. For millennia, he has journeyed across the galaxy, using stolen ships or the paths through the warp. Wherever he goes, cults dedicated to the Prince of Excess rise, and the faith in the God Emperor wanes. Unlike his Legion brothers, his devotion to Slaanesh is more religious than practical, and he is one of the worst enemies of the Ordo Hereticus. He is the only recorded Blood Angel never to lose himself to the thirst, and his self-control allows him to scheme and plot with an ease and scope that wouldn't shame a disciple of the Changer of Ways. While his brothers focus on their own satisfactions and desires, he seeks to increase Slaanesh's influence on the galaxy and his standing in the greater game of chaos. Astartes delights in corrupting members of the ecclesiarchy, using them to spread his corrupt beliefs amongst the masses of the Imperium. His rhetoric relies more on his lies than on his glamour, allowing him to preach his master's foul ways on the Vox, his followers blaring his words from powerful speakers on their war engines. Like many of his kin, Astartes displays the wings of his Primarch. He fights with a spear sparkling with eldritch light, and Psychers have described his presence as a black hole in the fabric of the Sea of Souls, a gateway leading directly to the maw of the youngest god. All of those who die near him, no matter their loyalties, have their souls torn from their corpses and dragged into this abyss, fed to Slaanesh, whether they were faithful servants of the Emperor or blood-crazed scions of Khorne. Many agents of the other Chaos gods have tried to kill Astartes for this, as the ruinous powers do not take kindly to being denied the souls they have marked as their own. On the Archotech world of Hell's Hollow, an alliance of warbands from the Imperial Fists, White Scars, Iron Hands, and Dark Angels corner the Archpriest and try to bring him down, only for him to escape through the warp after killing a dozen of their champions. In their fury, the Chaos Marines laid waste the entire planet, murdering billions of civilians, before turning on each other and tearing themselves apart. Despite the destruction of his cult on the planet, and his failure in achieving whatever goal he had set out for, Astartes was greatly pleased with this outcome. The Blood Angels are whimsical, egocentrical beings, and they are supremely unwilling to cooperate. Each of them believes himself to be the only being of importance in the universe, and to be only second in all of existence to the Dark Prince himself. The shackles of honor and duty they once placed upon themselves have been replaced by supreme indulgence, and many among them consider the act of drinking blood to be sacred, a way to commune with the divine as well as the supreme experience. With the murder of their own at Ishvan III, the carnage of Ishvan V, and the death of Horus, there is no vow remaining that the Legion hasn't broken already, and the Blood Angels see no reason to fear any other transgression. Blood is primal to whatever passes for culture among the shattered remnants of the Ninth Legion, for it is through its consumption that the sons of Sanguinius can sate the thirst. However, it is not sacred to them as it is to their imperial fists or other Cronet cults. To them, blood is merely the primary way through which they experience sensations beyond the ken of all mortals. During the Great Crusade, blood was the symbol of the genetic purity which they so desperately sought. But now the mutation and the eternity of indulging in their worst excesses have made monsters of them. Of them all. Those who still remember those days only laugh at how naive they once were. They see themselves as perfection manifest, or have long abandoned its pursuit in favor of hedonistic excess. While the thirst was initially a curse, a hunger that needed to be sated, now the sons of Sanguinius take pleasure in the myriad variations of experience they taste when indulging their dark urges. In a way, they are similar to drug addicts, incapable of conceiving the world around them in any other way than considering how to obtain their next high. Any human being is a potential meal to them first and foremost, and any use or attachment lays far beyond this primary concern. When a blood angel grows thirsty, even his most loyal and valuable mortal servants are at the risk of becoming their master's next victim. The bloodless corpses discarded after the deed, their existence already forgotten by their fickle lord. Raffen held aloft the spear of Telesto, called the light of Evangelion's sun, the tear-shaped blade shining like the fires of damnation, and the fist-sized ruby inserted within, glowing with the forbidding energies contained within, already reawakening after the long slumber, as they sensed the presence of one of Sanguinius's blood. All around him, his followers abandoned the orc corpses they were busy desecrating and raised their own weapons in homage, screaming ecstatically as they beheld the objective of the warband's quest. Finally, after decades of searching, he had found it here, on Evangelion, far into the Segmentum Obscurus. In the crowd of his followers, Raffen saw the face of Ramius Steele, and the expression on it made him laugh. The renegade had believed it to be Acio's fate to claim the weapon, and had been more than a little upset when Raffen had killed his birth brother and taken leadership of the warband for his own. Too bad for him, Raffen thought. Now that he had found the spear, he no longer needed the guidance of the wayward Inquisitor. He wasn't going to kill him right now. That would be distasteful, and probably at least a little bit ungrateful too. But once they had tested the spear's power, once Steele was certain that Raffen had been right, that the ancient weapon was his by right, well, things would be different. Combat Doctrine. They will come to you in the disguise of an angel, beautiful beyond compare, offering pleasure and illumination and asking only for the slightest price in return. But know this, sons and daughters of the God Emperor, theirs is a false salvation, for they are not but demons in disguise, and the love they speak of is nothing but the lie from which they derive the greatest, sickest pleasure, to see their victims willingly come to them, offering their blood to those who care nothing for their existence beyond a means to temporarily sate their eternal thirst. Entry 166 of the Ordo Hereticus archives about the Blood Angels. Most Blood Angels are content to remain within the Eye of Terror, the heart of their master's power, and to taste the infinite pleasure it has to offer. Sensations beyond the ken of the mortal realm and the blood of beings that have lived for millennia, yet know nothing of innocence. There are those, however, with greater ambitions, and they are one of the greatest threats to the Imperium of man. When the Blood Angels warband manages to escape the iron cage through its ever-shifting paths, there can be few reasons other than to raid any world catching its Chaos Lord's fancy. While other legions may scheme and plot, spending decades or even centuries carefully preparing the fall of an entire sector to the ruinous powers, most of the Blood Angels are far too self-centered for that. They seek out the most populated and least defended worlds before descending upon them, killing any who oppose them, taking what they want and leaving a ruined world in their wake. Usually, by the time the Imperial retribution arrives, they are long gone, and the planet has to be purged of their taint, at an even greater cost in lives. For this reason, Imperial ships on patrol are always on their guard for the slightest rumor, vision, or astropathic nightmare concerning the Ninth Legion. It is a lot easier to fight them in the void, where no innocent citizens will be caught in the crossfire. The Night Lords especially hunt down the Blood Angels for the necessary purges that follow their raids, often offend the ethics of the Sons of Nostramo. On rare occasion, though, a Blood Angel's warlord will manage to keep his thirst under control long enough to formulate a plan. These generally take the form of abductions amongst the target's world's ruling class. The unfortunate captives are brought before the Chaos Marines and exposed to his glamour. Most immediately swear fealty to the creature in a way by the lies of chaos. They are then sent back to their worlds to spread the word of Slaanesh, creating cults ready for the coming of their masters. Others use their wealth to procure slaves for their masters, or telling them the roads for convoys of Imperial criminals. Those with psychic gifts attempt rituals to tear open fabric of reality and bring forth the Neverborn, minions of Slaanesh, often accompanied by their Astartes counterparts, walking the insane paths of the warp alongside the demons. The case of Grendel's world, where an entire planet was lost despite the quick dispatch of the 8th Legion, is infamous. After years of investigation, the Inquisition retraced the entire demonic incursion to a single woman who believed that the first ritual would bring forth the perfect lover that stalked her dreams. Once battle is joined, the Blood Angels fight at the lead of mutant hordes and armies of spellbound followers. While they are capable of keeping a cold head as long as bolts aren't flying, once battle is joined, their minds are too damaged by their thirst and narcissism for them to have any solid grip on tactic. Sometimes they will charge ahead, leading their troops by example. Other times they remain in reserve until the final push to reap all the glory with the least effort. As illustrated the first time they broke free of the iron cage, the true threat of the Blood Angels is the legion of cultists and traitors within Imperial ranks. Like their fellow masters, these renegades excel at hiding their treachery until it is too late to stop them. But despite their decadence, the Blood Angels are not to be underestimated. Their devotion to the Dark Prince has granted them heightened senses and speed, and they are all masters of whatever weapon they favor. During the Great Crusade, they were amongst the Imperium's fiercest assault troops, and the gifts of their fellow patron have only made them stronger. They are a lesson to the faithful, for all the corruption and soul ruin that the warp twists its slaves with. It never renders them useless, for its malevolence spreads far beyond those already under its thrall. Many an Imperial champion has looked past the veil of the glamour and seen the monster, only to be defeated by what he thought to only be a pompous, damned one. The Sanguinary Marines. This is too long. Though all the Blood Angels bear the mark of Slaanesh on their flesh, there are those who walk further down the path of ruin than any of their brethren, indulging in their thirst beyond all other pursuits and letting it define their entire existence. While most sons of Sanguinius have at least a modicum of control over the thirst, seeking to sate it only with the most valuable blood, they gorge themselves relentlessly without care for the quality of the vitae they drink. These beings are rewarded for their devotion to the Dark Prince. These beings are rewarded for their devotion to the Dark Prince's gift for their gene line, and evolve into something altogether more terrifying than a simple traitor marine. They gain great wings like their sire, but these are not the beautiful feathered appendages of an angel. Instead, they harbor bat-like wings, the color of spilled blood. While these wings shouldn't by right be able to lift their massive, armored frame, the power of the warp allows them to fly. Most of them forego the use of weapons altogether, using fangs and claws to render their prey apart, revealing the sensation of blood splashing on their distorted features. These sanguinary marines, as they are called amongst the servants of the dark gods and those of the god emperor alike, do not possess the ability to disguise their true nature common to other blood angels. All who look upon them know them for the monsters they are. The bones of their skull and jaw are reshaped when they obtain their wings in order to allow their teeth the strength to bite through armor and skin and into the veins beneath. Like the mythical vampire of old Earth, they are beasts, hideous monsters that prey upon the weak and sate their dark hungers. Without the ability that allows for their kin to gather devotees, they are forced to hunt for the sustenance they so crave. They form pacts, lending their services to chaos lords from various legions, in return for a steady supply of blood. Such bargains are struck between the chaos lords and the strongest of the sanguinary marines, usually the one who can still remember, even if only dimly, what he once was. Those who employ them feed them the scum gather aboard their ships between raids, and they care not to use them near anyone they ought to take prisoner. While they are regarded with disgust by most, especially among their own legion, their usefulness as terror and shock troops cannot be denied, and their use is cheap enough that many warlords ignore their corruption and lack of self-control. Recruitment and gene seed. Corruption among the ranks of the Ninth Legion is rampant. The Touch of Slaanesh has rewritten their genetic code, twisting the existing flaws into an expression of the Dark God's principles, called, with quite literal explicitity, the Thirst, instead of the Red Thirst, All Blood Angels display elongated canines, and many of them have all their teeth changed into fangs, to better tear at the flesh of their prey. The Omophagia is heavily altered, allowing them to experience the lives of those they drain of blood, reliving decades worth of memories in a single moment. There are theories that they actually need to drink blood in order to counter the degeneration of their genes. But the Blood Angels themselves do it because of the sensation it provides to their debased minds. Wings are also a frequent mutation to their debased mind. Wings are also a frequent mutation, with the most obvious example being the Sanguinary Marines. But other Blood Angels display feathered wings instead, and retain the ability to use glamour, shrouding themselves in the same illusion as their father. On several occasions, a Blood Angel warlord has claimed to be Sanguinius himself, using the Demon Primarch's name to gather more deluded slaves to his cause. Whether or not these Chaos Lords believe their own lie remains unknown to the Inquisition. Every Chaos Marine with even a shred of intelligence left can see through the imposture, as many of them remember the time when the true Sanguinius fought amongst mortal men. And even those too young to have fought in the Great Crusade instinctively know that this is not one of their kind's gene sires. But for most of the human slaves of Chaos, Demon Primarchs are akin to mythical figures, closest to the fell gods they worship. Their ignorance makes them easy prey for such deceptions, and most realize that they have been lied to. The Blood Angels' long association with Fabius Bile has enabled them to perform the transformation from the infants they take from plundered worlds of their chattels or deluded followers with relative efficiency. Those who catch the eye of the few Blood Angels who remain interested in the Legion's future are first tested for physical adequacy. Then submitted to several compatibility tests, going from the mundane, genetic markers and the like, to the more esoteric, depending on the recruiter's own beliefs. In some cases, hundreds of recruits are immersed in the warp in gigantic debauches of never-born limbs and mortal flesh, and the survivors judged worthy of joining the ranks of Sanguinius' sons. Once chosen, these youths are interred within the Great Sarcophagus, the mechanism of which will automatically proceed with the implementation of each of the organs necessary to become a Space Marine, each of them harvested on the dead or vat-grown in some deviant laboratory. This process is a lot simpler than the series of complicated procedures required by traditional transformation practiced by loyalist legions, which seem to be a result of the Blood Angels no longer possessing the patience required to attend the delicate surgeries themselves, instead delegating their charges to the cold care of machines as much as demon as cold steel. Whatever the nature of those unfortunate souls placed within, by the time they emerge as fully formed Chaos Marines, all trace of their former identity is gone. Only the thirst remains. There are rumors that these dreaded sarcophaguses can turn even full-grown adults into Chaos Marines. Several Inquisitors have been lost investigating this, only for their genes to be rediscovered in dead Blood Angels. Despite extensive studies, it is still unknown whether this is due to the Blood Angels having slain the Inquisitor and claimed part of their DNA due to some freak mutation, or if the far more horrible possibility is the actual one. The Ordo Hereticus has been investigating this for decades, interrogating captive Blood Angels and dismantling their captured devices, while observing all purification protocols. But who knows what dreaded wonders the fallen sons of Sanguinius are capable of in this warp storm they call home. Really? Leantos, the Prince of Eidolon. Deep within the Eye of Terror, amidst an internal vortex in the warp currents, lie the demon world of Eidolon. Among the thousands of worlds that were engulfed in the Sea of Souls, when Slaanesh rose from the decadence of the Eldar Empire, it is unique. Screaming seers tell of its rhymes and deranged songs. Demons whisper of it to those foolish enough to hear the treacherous words. While most worlds in the Eye fall under the dominion of one of the ruinous powers, Eidolon is a battlefield, a place eternally contested between the four dark gods. Four powerful demon princes each rule over a slice of the world, and their forces wage eternal war against each other, trying to seize control of the whole planet, and knowing full well that none of them will ever win. For the dark gods do not care about one more demon world. All they want is for the fighting between their servants to continue for all eternity. To that end, they pluck the unfortunate lost to the Eye's tide, sparing them annihilation and bringing them to Eidolon, that they may fight and die for the glory of chaos. Many paths lead to Eidolon, but there is only one way out: to defeat one of the four lords of this fell place and refuse to take his place. Every other escape is but temporary, and even those who meet their doom during raids beyond the warp portals find their souls dragged back to the demon world. Death itself cannot free those claimed by Eidolon, and the four masters of the realm are in truth as much slaves as the billions that cower in their shadow. Yet, for all the power is ever influx on Eidolon, one particular lord has risen to prominence in the last centuries. Cultists across the breadth and width of the Imperium whisper his name in the prayers, or sail through the Eye in the hope that they will be chosen to join his armies on the demon world. Known as Lenatos, he was once a space marine and captain of the Blood Angels. His peregrinations through the Eye led him to be trapped on Eidolon, and he sought to escape by defeating the Slaanesh lord who then ruled over a quarter of the world. But after slaying the powerful demoness in single combat, Lenatos chose to remain on the demon world. Since then, his many victories over the champions of the other three Chaos Gods have earned him ascension to demonhood, and his power has grown greatly, surpassing his rivals for longer than any previous lord in Eidolon's long and bloody history. Although he commands few blood angels, those owing him their oath are Chaos Lords in their own right, leading hordes of tens of thousands of cultists and lesser warriors. On several occasions, Lenatos has used powerful sorcery to tear open a path across the warp and attack worlds within the Imperium that had fallen under a warp storm's shadow. When this happens, demons and cultists pour forth in equal measure, for Eidolon is home to both, and all kneel before Lenatos' throne. Every time the demon prince of Slaanesh has led from the front, killing all who opposed him with his mighty demonic blade, a weapon as twisted and as evil as its wielder. Known as the Blade Encarmine, whatever. It is rumored to have once been used by Sanguinius himself, although such claims are common among the traitor legions. Regardless of its origins, the weapon allows Lenatos to taste the blood of his foes without needing to drink it directly. For despite his transformation into a prince of the Neverborn, Lenatos is still affected by the thirst. His position on Eidolon ensures he never runs out of victims, but the thrill of novelty pushes him to continue his assault on the outside universe. We have next the Warcry, which of course is going to be longer than it should be. It is only very rarely that the Blood Angels do not announce their presence to their foe long before they are first seen. The debauched sons of Sanguinius reveal in the terror of their enemy almost as much as they do the blood they drink from their still living bodies of the vanquished, and to see their advance is akin to watching a veritable menagerie of horrors inside the mind of demented musician. Vast choirs and orchestras of the lost and the damned will sing the praises of an advancing host of the Ninth Legion, calling out their names and deeds. Chained and drugged psychers will send waves of adoration and terror ahead, and great challenges and speeches are broadcast across the Vox for the enemy to hear. Not only do this weaken the enemy morale, it also bolsters the self-centered narcissists, Blood Angels, and their cohorts. Savvy Imperial commanders, we're at Warcry and we're not getting to the normal part anyway. Savvy Imperial commanders will order their forces not to listen to the Vox and blare sirens through every speaker to drown out the sound of the Blood Angels' claims, while preachers with augmented lungs and vocal cords recite prayers to the Emperor. Many an Imperial guardsman has barely survived an encounter with the Blood Angel warband, only to end up deafened by his own side's auditive barrage. This assault on the senses, however, ends as soon as the lines of the two armies meet. Then the Blood Angels let loose the monsters within them as they feed, and can rarely speak at all. Amidst the orgy of sensations they are enjoying, on the rare occasions that they do, or when they have no occasion to perform their grotesque parades and still wish their foe to know who they are facing, the following war cries have been known to be shouted to the enemy. For Sanguinius, behold the blood of angels, and Slaanesh thirsts as we do. And you would think this would be all, but it's not. At the gates of Sanguinius' palace, the sanguinary guard fought. The skies above them were aflame with war, as energies from the demon Primarch's conflicted mind crushed against one another. Like the philosophers of Alterra had said, as above, so below. Shades in the form of Astartes came at the line of Azekulon's warriors, their spectral weapons all too capable of causing damage to all that they weren't real. Here, psychics were subject to one with the strongest will. physics, psychics, whatever. And even now Sanguinius's will was great indeed. These ghost projections of but a fragment of his mind were proof that the Lord of the Angels remained mighty and worthy of Ezekielion's devotion. Walking beside the ghosts of the sons Sanguinius had ordered killed were the lesser spirits, the frail humans who had died in the war fought by the demigods who walked amongst them. The commander didn't think that Sanguinius should feel any guilt for their passing, for they should have been honored to die for him. But as ever, questioning was in his place. His duty, sworn in blood, was to protect his liege, and he and his brother had held this oath true, even as the rest of the legion had abandoned their Primarch in the name of their petty ambitions. Traitors, all of them. Time passed, and the battle raged on. Ezekielion tore his spear from the ground and shook free the remains of the ghost. Already the marble floor was regenerating, the cracks closing as if time was flowing in reverse. Which it was. With the fall of the last of the echoes, the mind of his Primarch was clear, and his hold on the world was reasserting itself, restoring back to its perfect form. Soon there would be no trace left of the battle. For a time, the world would be at peace until the next surge in Sanguinius' psyche. This time, the attackers had been weak, and the Sanguinary Guard had not needed to rely on the help of unworthy allies to defend their lord. This gave Ezekielion some hope. Perhaps his lord was growing free of his undue remorse. The commander of the Sanguinary Guard lifted his eyes to the tormented heavens. In the distance, he could see the blazing golden light of the Firetide, the psychic flare of the Astronomicon reaching even here in the eye, plunging entire systems into purifying fire and creating the only region of the eye where the demon world had never journeyed. Ezekielion blinked. Was it just a trick of his vision? Or was his memory playing tricks on him? It seems to him that the light was weaker than the last time he had been able to look upon it.